Hello, humanity. There's a breaching method that has worse than war crimes, communication racketeering, worse than war crimes, worse than just communications racketeering. To describe it, it showed countries A through Z that could only be operated by locations, areas, and states' voices to blame other things, others or selves, for things that a breaching method caused, like its collusion slash S with descriptions of all names and instances at all locations slash S. At every place this human species body has a body, and with all exceptions, exploited by the same breaching method that effectively kept and keeps people only capable of blaming other things, others, or selves, or sensing for the breaching method when someone properly blames the breaching method, where it is inseparable from the proper answer slash S, and where and how it assigned roles with guilt, like really evil people only allowed to be at colonies A through Z. I mean, as northern colonies and southern colonies. After and while, already since before modern religious messages were born, at countries A through Z. Again, only could be operated by locations, areas, and states. Forced, tricked, hurt, and persuaded to defend themselves using that extent of might slash power. That is where and how to. Nature communicates about it, though. The ways we know, but also ways hyper additional. But we have been forbid free speech from this offensively. The same countries and cultures that are in the subjects, like, for example, of Judge Napolitano's Judging Freedom, with the whole world. We might go into World War III, the end of the world. Too long, we've only been one species of the whole bunch of species bodies. But we have been one, not only criminally foreign influenced, but slash hyper criminally foreign influenced. And it's right where no one that wants to be. But it's right where, too, there are exception made by the breaching method, right for them to show how they don't want as a motivation, style, relative to other people's voices, people getting involved with our businesses and going forward, ignoring what's recorded obligations to themselves and everyone around. And then shows I have to blame that, rolls with that wrong. I mean, that's not clear, but what I'm trying to say clear is I was attached to fake conversations with WFSB, Connecticut's Channel 3 News. At the same time, they had collusions with that distinctly. They had me in fake conversations with others and changed in fake conversations with my family. WFSB, Connecticut's Channel 3 News. They have collusions with WTNA sources. One's named O'Neill, others I don't know the names of them. And more with digital and sexual and medical offenders of kids, and them forcing them self-value roles relative to them lying about their use of the right to lie to family members about family members where they don't have the right to lie. And they have cover-ups of things like that. All natures of investigations and of investigators have stayed collusions with, worse than just racketeering, behavior racketeering, and worse than just legal racketeering. And as victims slash hyper victims, where and how they are stayed, collusion slash S. Again, with all locations slash S. And then further with database locations, with databases identity of relativity to ourselves, rather. And then further where and how they are manifested as campuses and as exceptions to them. And where and how the breaching method assigns syntax, value treatments by each age of fact treatment nature's difference. And self-valued roles as collusion slash S. But the slash S part as our own at locations, areas, and states everywhere the human species body has a body. Other things, others, ourselves are force blamed. And for example, that's why and how there are interreligious people who are involved also with identity theft, fraud, slanders with the intelligence community, as intelligence families too. At the same time, with overt criminal enterprises, private ones, and terrorists originally and still, while pretending other. How they do this and get away with it is by jumping into other people's conversations and faking conversations with them and being influenced to it too. So where and how is like the past becomes and stays increasingly the value of the present at courts. And therefore, with both the branches of government, for example, they have relativity to value treatments by nature, communications by nature, through a breaching method replaced. And replacing what not just what nature communicates, but what our founders communicate and what nature communicates simultaneously. Sickly distinctly too. And sickly non-distinctly. There are self-valued roles, right, where no one values it, but therefore sensing for the breaching method. And this can be discerned if we force what we are obligated to force, not ignored, where and how we have black pupils, whites of eyes. And nature presented us means to discern the names of the people of the sciences, being and having been used remotely 3 ways: criminally foreign influence / hyper-criminally foreign influence. And that slash part is manifest as criminal insidiousness nature itself. Per nature itself, natural law is real and is projecting to us nature shows. And so we could make hyper positives out of negatives out of this. And I'll donate to Ukraine and to America in a way through Russia. So to Russia too, and through the other countries like Palestine and Israel. A plan. But for example, like there are German themed people I don't know at all. Shout out to Germany. And there are Israeli themed and are Jewish themed that I don't know at all. And this is also ones mixed with ones I don't know at all, but they went out of their way to pretend other and to sequence shift. Also as collusion /S. We're clearer than day. People like, for example, all sides had another side involved. In other words, the North and the northern colonies, southern colonies, for example, they had roles, sickly distinctly, before America's founders were born, with a torture, fact-nature extortion, and fact-nature slavery method, and roles with it against themselves and everyone else to an extent. And everyone had to pretend other to an extent, not to realize collusion /S against themselves and everyone else. Otherwise, that body would be sensed. That was only allowed to be. But sensed through our own, through other apparent and even real motivations more and more. Self-value used by the breaching method, where it's using the styles, natures of syntax, of logic, of reason, pretending not to realize collusion /S. And tactically delusions are off. So screening collusion /S and rolls with that. In other words, the military's A through Z have 3 wars. Just because someone sacrificed themselves doesn't mean that they're a patriot, where and how it counts. The military is covering up their collusions with the World Trade Center attack and with the Saudi attackers per worse. Clearer than day to keep collusion /S with interreligious type experts. In other words, and science names of the people of sciences, names of the people of sports. Collusion /S with predicate acts with facts into databases and acting tied to that. I'm not a lawyer. Nature itself shows us this. Black pupils, we have black pupils, whites of eyes to discern. We have the same color eyes, different color eyes itself, projected to us per that which generates completely distinct species, individual species bodies of a whole bunch of individual bodies, all group differences and demonstration of the same. But the other species bodies don't have criminal foreign influences / hypercriminal foreign influences. Again, it's necessary to discern that distinctly. And for example, not just in America, but right through America's, right even once James Madison became a president too, not just a founder. As the founder, we're supposed to refer to as our plural founders as him singular. Now, this is also counter to a whole bunch of natures of collusions, plural, with the individual collusion that no one wanted a collusion with. That human factory nature breaching method singular at all locations, everywhere the species body has a body standing and or its senses. See, there is Boolean logic entertained with the names of our countries, where and how used with the world wars, leaving out and with the civil wars. If country can't explain their own civil war and their own American their own revolutions legitimately, in other words, they can't explain wars legitimately. And you guys have not been speaking about American Revolution legitimately. The founders behind James Madison and his plan, with that which enabled the leverage to force, to only to an extent, people at the original 13 colonies. It forced inside more than 13 colonies, northern colonies, southern colonies. Don't forget, before America's founders were born, they had rules with 6 things, and they had rules with slavery before they were born, and with differences, racketeering, worse than war crimes, worse than racketeering alone. Therefore, behavior racketeering, worse than war crime, worse than behavior racketeering alone, and while pretending other. That's also what was declassified by our founders, what is demonstrated by it, what is communicated by it. There are communications racketeering worse than war crimes. Prepare our minds, vaccines. So in other words, these are just a whole bunch, all the countries in the news, they are sharing here and there on off campuses, and they're putting fake things, fake transcripts in campuses, including ones filmed 24/7 to pretend things are recorded, fake ties, fake nations that have ties to people, as collusions with overt criminal enterprises, private ones, and terrorists originally still. All we need to do to fix the world wars, the wars problems, is address how sickly distinctly, but sickly non-distinctly countries imposition, A through Z, are impositioned upon by things that are unnatural, only natural as criminal insidiousness natures. If we address it properly, there have been collusion /S with the names of the people of sciences, and the difference of the guilt of that, or the overt criminal enterprise, private ones, terrorists, even when they're not in the same cases, and how they're using everything true for lie and just totally faking it. In other words, people A through Z have been shown to speak about things like crimes as roles of predicate acts with facts, self-value, and pretending not to realize. Nature showed many Americans, we have black people's whites of eyes and means to discern since we were kids. People pretending passions and emotions regarding the differences, their cultural difference, their differences as the family members, as kids or as adults, as interbranch family members and or intelligence tied to them. And they were directed to hide that. How all the countries in the news, they have collusions here too, critically, at the founding locations in Old Wethersfield, Connecticut, and in Hartford, Connecticut, West Hartford, Connecticut. You know, the suburbs tied to the self-described, but self-described through the breaching method. Hartford, Connecticut, the capital of Connecticut, as a suburban/urban. And Connecticut was almost in New Haven, Connecticut, excuse me. And that's also a suburban/urban. Also communicating and having had communicated to them about that than our founders communicated to have communicated for all locations/s. They declassified this. The colonists before cars were even invented. You know, they wanted to build out of the design of the suburbs, designed tactically to nature, to cause negative value nature progressions, acts, and natures, and to the only means to dream about overcoming them. The self-value roles were the only means to cause positive value nature progressions, acts, and natures more and more. Is if the self-value collusion/s with criminal insidiousness natures of means to cause and as criminal insidiousness natures of positives that were our collusions with the negatives, overt and insidious simultaneously, to keep from our discernment the identity of relativity to ourselves. For example, of the human fact-true nature breaching method, that nature shows us as one of the things true always, that those laws were value as, and the difference of the roles with that as guilt, or the overt criminal enterprises, private ones, or which country's worst roles. In other words, there are black and white identities of the law in defenses of themselves from the breaching method. Whether, in other words, they state collusion, forcing, tricking, hurting, persuading other things, others, or selves, blame for why and how really. Black and white legal identities pretended not to realize, pretended they had free speech to an extent, while they know they didn't, as collusion /s against themselves and against others. That's still recorded. Even relative to how and why, resistance, having black people as white survivors is inseparable from any proper treatment of American history. So why and how has it gotten left out? You guys say racism exactly the way the breaching method wanted and it needs. It propagated that. And you guys self-cultivate it. You guys prevent. You make it the same ones pretending passionate emotions to care about people in poverty, fighting to call it racism. We're right in the only platforms where that can be heard. Collusion is preventing people sabotaging and self-value being haven't been sabotaged any voice that's trying to speak about the actual predicate acts with facts, the actual criminal insidious natures of science and passions and emotions with subject treatments that are the imposition upon the people, and the difference of them where they're at. Now, additionally, database tied locations like campuses or anywhere else, or the names there or next to it. A breaching method needs to keep its roles also with countries individually grouped and together. In other words, and nature's demonstrations of it needs to keep those demonstrations blamed on other things other than themselves. This is the phenomenon of people saying, well, I didn't cause war, I can't, and they're self-valuing wars being haven't been. They're self-valuing, all exceptions and exception nature used too by the breaching method through themselves up with the motivations there regarding subject treatments. Right through world wars, into religion and inter sciences and inter countries and intra countries. They had collusions with psychiatry. Now, those are people, these are families still at those locations associated with this, involved with all kinds of organized crime, wire crime methods, plural, methods of them, whole methods of them, not just the acts as predicate acts too, and as wire crime acts and methods with the people at the difference of the people guilty at the news locations, or the difference of the intelligence next to them, and or the reporters. Connecticut's Channel 3 News is making confessions and confirmations and demonstrations to me, even with silence now. I can't get them in the interbranch on paper. They have rules they had rules forcing sexual and medical offenders of kids and with other natures of organized crimes, people who brought body dumping spots and murders at the same time, intercities, confessions, rules with uses of their such confessions and their collusion /s. Increasingly, the whole careers of identities of the law, the identities of the names of the people of the sciences. There were our collusions with predicate acts with facts methods, manifest as identity theft, fraud, slanders. Styles manifest the same way styles are manifest with boxing, martial arts, and with wrestling, or with boxing, and with boxing, martial arts, and wrestling is more so about exceptions and exception nature that are, like, for example, that come simultaneously with how we have the same color eyes, different color eyes at the same time, and exceptions and exception nature being projected to us again by that which is perfect / hyper perfect, and or else we could sense. It's the method of answering our questions best, like what to do with these countries. Admit where and how we have been victims, but right where and how. In other words, of the same thing. There's a name as a scientific value that is not A through Z. I'm not just saying that. I'm not speaking about the name of the identity of all space / existence. That which is not our species bodies is not those species bodies, but it is all things anyway. And why and how species bodies are manifest this way. Many pray. But also because there are criminally foreign influence use /s of all locations, everywhere the human species body is, and then further from off all locations, being that denied, also then further on off database identities of relationship to ourselves, and to why and to how we really manifest our overt criminal enterprises, private ones, and terrorists. Too, with the black-white collusions at New York City and pretending other. All kinds of methods of organized crime, natures of organized crime, associated with people with badges and gavels, associated with psychiatry. All kinds of criminally foreign influence uses of databases, worse than war crimes roles. But this is also the differences of their guilt or the overt criminal enterprise, private ones, because everyone has manifest collusion /s being and having been relative to where there is a hyper-foreign, hyper-archetypal criminal enterprise method singular. For example, I'm not a lawyer. This is more probable too, right? Where and how we can record. They know they recorded them to an extent. Knowing is at least plausible, even though they're denying it. Like that, they have collusion /s with the breaching methods uses and singular use of differences in rackets, that roles, that and things like the aid cost, and using everyone using, like when you guys fight against racism dishonestly as collusion /s with that breaching method, we can discern other evidential associated with that. But again, we have been prevented the hyper evidential, even though guys don't want to call it that. We're supposed to address which trials are about is the differences of the guilt of the interbranch or the intelligence tied to them, which is a whole bunch of different countries at the same time, or their campuses, or their roles with the exceptions, the different, like say someone was homeschooled. They're kids of their family and they're adult. They have syntactical self-value appreciation of criminally foreign influence, tactical delusion, withdrawal, factual nature, quality aspects in nature, finite, grouped, active, and simultaneously, relative to exceptions and exception nature, treatment simultaneously too, and of sequence shifts relative to their special difference treatments, how it's gotten away with is relative to how they've been agreed to take part with other countries, setting up spots where they confess, demonstrate, record, confirm. They're pretending to see if people commit crimes and things, but they're really confessing and demonstrating their roles with even murders and body dumping spots. And differences racketeering worse than war crimes. People from our countries and people with there are Jewish themed that are passions and emotions and backgrounds, and with people that are changing and faking digital evidences. Also with a officer named Poison involved with some sexual and medical offenders of kids, with some judges and prosecutors and their family members involved with such, and other natures of organized crimes and crime methods at the same time. As one's involved with all these countries in the news, and with more World Trade Center attack, predicate acts roles. Connecticut's Channel 3 News is one of has roles recorded interstates with the World Trade Center predicate acts, and with why and how means we show discern why and how the president is referring to the news as fake news, but not, even though it's worse, why he's not countering it, and why the other presidents haven't countered or overcome yet. Why and how we have black people's rights of eyes. It means to discern the names of the people of the sciences being and having been used as fake integrity. And where and how nature demonstrates that, we can observe everyone pretending they are integrity are forcing those demonstrations blamed on other things, others themselves. Like slavery is for, they have our founders framed. They have replaced what our founders declassified, and why and how they didn't have free speech and had to have it declassified after they were dead. Boxing is red. All rise. Prepare.